It's sailor, something
Red
at night,
sky
sailor's delight, something in the morning, sailors take warning. What is it?
Red sky.
Red sky at night, yes.
What does that mean? You're going to have a storm?
Or no storm. Yeah.
Or no storm, or no storm.
Red sky in the morning is supposed to be a warning.
Yeah. Don't go out there.
Doesn't always work, especially if you have a red sky that night.
Yeah.
Right.
Then what do you do?
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and call this first meeting of the Planning Commission for 2016 to order. And John, why don't you lead us off in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Begin after me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. That will move us on to the roll call.
Please let the record reflect that all commissioners, with the exception of Chairwoman O'Connor and Commissioner Claus, have excused absences.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion or a motion?
I will make a motion to move the minutes from our last meeting.
Okay, so Commissioner Murphy made a motion. Let's go ahead and vote. Right? We had a second, so we'll vote. And that item passes 3-0. Next, we have item B, which is public comments. I don't see anybody here, so we could probably forego reading the public comment section.
People like to read it, but it's
If you're
unnecessary.
in here and you want to speak, you better show yourself.
You have a little time to have the power.
Yeah,
We got
exactly.
a game on.
That's true. That's okay.
And then, so move on to item C, which is our consent calendar. There's no items on the consent calendar. So we are now at item D, which is public hearings. And item number 2, do we have a staff report?
Yes, and John Tilton, our city architect planning manager, will give the staff report for item 2.
Good evening, Vice Chair, Commissioners. This is a coastal development permit for a new home in the Monarch Beach neighborhood. It is also a CDP for the demolition of an existing home that was built in 1967. The existing home is 2,240 square feet, and the proposed home is roughly double that. It is within the appeals area of the Coastal Commission and may be appealed by anyone should someone want to do that. They could be appealed to the Coastal Commission. This again is on the ocean side of the highway in the Monarch Bay community. It does abut right up against the PCH, the Coast Highway there. And it's compatible with the neighborhood in terms of the height and the size. Just to let you know that when you look at the site plan, you'll see that some of the setbacks appear to be relatively small, somewhat unusual. This neighborhood of homes on a couple of streets in this area is a particular tract that received a variance via the recorded tract map for setbacks, unique setbacks for each, in fact, for each and every home, a little bit different. This project does comply with all the required setbacks and all the development standards of the zone it is in. We did receive a letter from the Homeowners Association noting their approval. I also note there appeared to be a little bit of controversy internally. This is why we really like these homeowners associations, because they can deal with their own issues usually successfully by the time they get to us than it's a pretty simple issue. Is that we've, as you'll see in our draft resolution, all the findings for a coastal development permit we feel can be made, and we did not receive any other correspondence, and it's staff's recommendation to approve this coastal development permit. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John.
Of course, I'm so out of practice, I completely forgot to show you the
We have a presentation.
the presentation. So I'll go through this quickly. Here's the location of the home, as I described, very much adjacent to Pacific Coast Highway. This is the existing home. I would call this somewhat of a traditional mid-century modern wood-sided home. This is the neighbor to the left. This is the neighbor to the right. And actually, this is actually part of the lot. You can see some of the stakes that were required by the Homeowners Association Design Review Committee approval. This is the rear yard. And actually, the property line's all the way down here, although it looks like it's here. There is a sound wall that is right existing, and that's not proposed to change. And then the front yard here, side property lines. This is a view of the street view of the home. 3-car garage, 2-story structure, all within the height limits of the city. The rear yard is a bit higher than the street level, so it appears less in height from the rear. This is the grade of the rear, so it appears like a 1-story building on that side. This is the right side of the building. And obviously we don't have the left side of the building. But again, in summary, we feel all the findings can be made, and we recommend approval of the structure.
Great, thank you, John. Does anybody have any questions? Commissioner McCann, do you want to have any questions? No? Okay.
I have one question.
Please.
I read in there that they labeled this tropical transition architecture. I don't know what that is. Perhaps I can be enlightened.
Well, that sometimes it's referred to as a little bit of a plantation style. I think just when you look at the roof line and the combination of the longitudinal aspect of the home, this type of home might be seen maybe in Florida or in Hawaii or that type of environment. It has a little bit of that kind of a flavor. It's not your typical Tuscan or ranch-style home. I think it's probably some other people might have a different opinion of that style, but it's very traditional looking.
Thank you.
Great. Actually, I don't really have any questions, John. I think you and I chatted earlier today, and I had specific questions relative to the setbacks that you clarified. So I'm good. Is the applicant here?
I'm the architect for the applicant.
Do we open the public hearing?
Yep, open
So,
the public
Go
hearing.
ahead and open the public hearing. So if you want to come up, if you have anything you want to add or any.
Nothing to add right now. I think John did an excellent job of presenting the project, so if no one else has a comment from the neighbors of the community, I'll just let the commission vote.
Great. And I don't see that we have any speaker cards, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and come back to the commission. Anybody have any thoughts, or you want to lead off?
Well, as far as I could see, and looking at the renderings and being a little familiar with that area, I think it's a good fit. I don't see any issues.
Okay. Commissioner McCann?
Yeah, I was a little bit confused at first about the roof line, but I satisfied myself on that. And I concur with the findings of the staff with respect to, making the appropriate findings for a coastal development permit. So I'll be voting yes on the project.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner McCann. And I don't have really any comments. I think it's a good-looking building. It's, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I always hate to see kind of the mid-century modern stuff get ripped down, but I don't own it, so I don't get to make that call. I think it's a good-looking project, and certainly would support a motion of moving it forward.
I move to approve Coastal Development Permit CDP 15-0019 to allow the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and construction of a new single-family dwelling on land located within the residential single-family 4 RSF4 zoning district at 431 Monarch Bay Drive.
Okay, that's a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, we have a second, so let's call for the vote. And that item passes 3-0. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you. When are they going to demo?
And that brings us to the second public hearing, item number 3, which is the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yes, Senior Planner Kurth Nelson will provide the staff report.
Good evening and Happy New Year, Vice Chair Nelson and the members of the Planning Commission. The item before you is Zone Text Amendment, ZTA.
We'll just clarify that you're not related.
Oh, yeah. Not related. That we know of, at least.
Not that, yeah. Zone Text Amendment 15-0002 before you is brought forth in accordance with Governor Brown's executive order of April of last year that proclaimed a state emergency due to the ongoing drought that has resulted in depleted water supplies. The city had previously enacted a landscaping ordinance in '92 in accordance with the Water Conservation and Landscaping Act, and then subsequently revised it in 2009 based on Assembly Bill 1881, which went a little bit further than the Water Conservation and Landscaping Act. In 2009, the City Council adopted an ordinance in accordance with those provisions, but what the city did, as staff attended the draft stakeholder meetings there, the county adopted a regional ordinance that better served the county and the specific climatic needs here in Orange County as opposed to just adopting the state ordinance. So in 2009, the City Council adopted that ordinance and corresponding submittal requirements and guidelines. Again, this time, with the help of the Municipal Water District of Orange County, or MODOC, a stakeholder committee was put together. Staff attended most of those meetings. And it's really was just an amendment to what has already been done, amending the ordinance and also the guidelines. And the rationale between separating the ordinance from the guidelines is the guidelines are pretty specific. They're pretty technology-based, based on irrigation types of supplies and technology, smart controllers and things like that. And separating the base ordinance that establishes the thresholds and the submittal requirements and guidelines allows us to make changes without having to come back to you for zone text amendments each time. So that's how it's still formulated. The biggest changes in the ordinance are in accordance with the state model, who have reduced the thresholds of when water efficiency landscaping requirements would take place. They reduced them down to new landscape or projects down to 500 square feet when the ordinance and the requirements would have to go into effect, and for rehabilitated landscape projects down to 2,500 square feet. Previously, they were up to, I think, 2,500 and 5,000 for single family. One of the other options that they've allowed now is a prescriptive compliance option. So if it's less than 2,500 square feet and you institute a certain plant palette that has very low summer water usage, it's assumed that you're meeting these maximum applied water allowances. And so you don't have to go through all of these submittal requirements. If you took the time to go through the submittal requirements package, you see that it's pretty extensive. There's a lot of water use calculations. There's a need for a grading plan, an irrigation plan, soils reports. It's pretty extensive, and it's staff. We've talked about this. It's pretty onerous on the mom and pop. So this prescriptive compliance ordinance is an option for the mom and pop projects to comply with the needs of water efficiency, but not have to go through all the expense of those types of plans. The other thing that it does is it encourages the use of gray water, and if you're under a certain threshold, then you same type of thing, prescriptive compliance. You don't have to go through all the calculations. The submittal requirements and guidelines has been changed in accordance with recommendations from the drafting committee. And so we've changed that, and we've just attached that so you can kind of look through it as you look to see the changes to the zone text amendment. I'd like to note on the zone text amendment, there's a little bit of a formatting faux pas. So on on the dais, there has been an attachment for Exhibit A, page 1 and 2, under 9.55020 applicability, subsection A1. On what we distributed, it had 1 underlined, indicating that was a new section. That's just a formatting error. That's not a new section. You can see the changes that have been made through the strike-throughs and the underlines in those particular sections. The only section under there that has been added new is subsection 5, which is completely underlined. And then under subsections B and subsection C, those just noted that those are actually already in the ordinance. They're not being changed. It's the same as is. So that's just a point of clarification. It's a bit of a formatting error, but I wanted to make sure that we approve the right thing moving forward because it's going to council a week from tomorrow. I also like to note that the city is compelled to take some action, either adopting a regional ordinance, which actually DWR, Department of Water Resources, likes, again, because it responds locally to the climatic variations that we have down here and not statewide. And so they support that. And we've changed the things here locally to fit our requirements. But if we didn't, then we would revert back to the state model, which is a little bit cumbersome and onerous, and just doesn't respond to the local needs here and the climate that we have. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend adoption and approval of the proposed zone text amendment to the council and approve the attached draft resolution containing the findings for that approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission had at this time.
Thank you, Kurth.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Councilmember McCann?
I got a promotion. I thought I was a commissioner.
I'm sorry. You did, yes. Commissioner McCann, my apologies.
So are the prescriptive plants readily available?
The prescriptive, there's a reference manual that's actually, there's a definition of it in the submittal requirements and guidelines. It's called WULCOs. It's developed by, I'm not sure which university, but one of the UC schools, and it has the plant ratings for all those plants. So as landscape architects and we as planners who would be reviewing these come in, you looked at the plant factor for those certain plants, and if it's that particular plant factor, then you know that what its water usage is. So it's not something that's a landscape architect can come and say, well, this is a variation of this plant, and it happens to be drought tolerant in our area. No, we have it's a reference list, and we go by that reference list.
So I'm sorry, is it a species list, or is it some kind of a water demand factor, and then you have to look up to see if that plant meets or not?
It's a species list, and then it has a rating next to it based on which area of the state you're in.
Okay, so if I'm a homeowner and I walk down to the local nursery and I say, hey, I need to get, some of these and these, are they readily available?
Some of them should be here. I know in working just with projects here, some of them are, maybe not everything that's on in
Right,
the
but someone can comply. They might not get that one, but they can get this and this.
Right, and we have that document here. So if a mom and pop comes in and wants to do that, we make that available to them and say, hey, this is what region you're in. Here's how you read this document. Go down to your nursery and see if you get these plants, and then they can. It's pretty easy.
Okay, and we have to do this or some version of this per the state.
Correct.
Okay, and will our ZTA make our ordinance or whatever less onerous on our residents than if we just adopted the state sample ordinance?
I think so, because some of the things that we've done in the submittal requirements and guidelines, there's a worksheet there it's a spreadsheet that we can actually give to them, like the local architects. For the mom and pop, they wouldn't be doing that. Mm-hmm. But you just fill in the data and punch it out, and then the calculations come out pretty easily. It's actually pretty cool. They went through it when I was going to these meetings. And it refines some of the distribution uniformity of the irrigation heads, and I'm not a master on that, and I've told Ursula and John that, but I've been to at least one training, so I understand what the principle and concept is, and Orange County has kind of been ahead of the curve in that, and there were a couple of representatives on the committee who are from the irrigation. I mean, it's just like anything, it's pretty precise, and there's experts, so they tweak those sections to make it germane to Orange County, and so in that regard, yeah, it's pretty prescriptive, and you can go and look at the requirements and understand exactly what you need to do or what needs to be included. Again, not for mom and pop, but for the landscape architects who put together these plans.
Okay, awesome, thanks. But it'll still be tight enough to comply with what the state wants.
Yes, it has to be as effective as, and it was deemed to last time, and we're assuming we're going to get that same rating this time after speaking with DWR over the summer.
Okay, awesome. And so this is going to council?
Well, we're here this evening soliciting your recommendation to move it forward to council. Yes.
Right, and then does the council have to do like 2 readings and a certain
Yes.
time frame for implementation?
And there'd be a public hearing. There'd be a first reading and a second reading in 30 days, I think, before it's effective.
That's correct.
Because I saw in the language it said something about February 1st, so I just didn't know if there was, going to be able to be implemented or not. Or
Is it problematic, our timing, Kurth?
We talked to Jennifer about it a little bit, and we're checking with
We're going to
council
double
make
check,
sure
and
we're
if it is,
okay.
then we'll put it on as an urgency item. My gut reaction, I'm not the water expert, but we have people in my office who do water law all the time. My gut reaction is it's not an issue. If it is, then we'll put the item on as an urgency item, and we'll get it adopted that way, so we don't have to do the first and second reading.
Okay, so but I guess I would be supportive of the ZTA with flexibility to staff to adjust the implementation date as needed to not create headaches. That's it for my comments.
Commissioner Murphy, do you have any questions, comments?
Well, overall, if I understand this, of course, this is in response to the governor's executive order.
Yes.
From 2015. And because we're trying to comply with state mandated applications, we still have this little wiggle room that you've kind of expressed in terms of how we make application. I mean, not every county is going to apply this exactly the same way. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, states within Orange County may not adopt this. Not every state was represented at those draft committee, and that's their purview. We just felt this
city,
was
not every city within Orange County.
Yeah, sorry, every city within Orange County, and that's their purview. But we felt for the city this was better because it gave us better flexibility. There was evapotranspiration rates that if you go by the state model, there's only 3 within the county. If you look on the guidelines now, we have one for every city and a lot of others, the smaller zip codes for the, it's not in our jurisdiction, but for the unincorporated areas of Orange County. So it's very specific to Orange County. And they can use these evapotranspiration rates as they're putting together their water use calculations so that it's going to be something that actually works within the area you're located.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
I think I had a couple questions. So how does this, we have two documents here. We have the zoning, or the code amendments, and then we have the application. Are we just dealing with the code amendments, and the application is more for us to look at, but we're not really...
Right. You're just
your document.
dealing with the zone text amendment, the changes to the language in the actual code. Again, the submittal requirements and guidelines are separate, so that as technology changes, as advances are made, we can just easily make those changes as opposed to coming back each time and going before you to do that. So it makes it a little easier for us to implement, and then as changes come up, to make changes, at the counter and respond to things that are going on in the industry.
Right. Okay. And then how does, I was looking at the application. I know we're not approving it, but I do have a couple questions, really specifically related to artificial turf. And I'm starting to see it pop up a lot more. And in some cases, it looks really good. And in other cases, it looks like, the back, it doesn't look like grass. It looks like green carpet. And do we have any kind of design protocol or any design standards or suggestions that we can include in? I don't want to get into that, your guys' business, but it's certainly I'm sure some of the neighbors are.
That goes more to other development standards in the code and what landscaping is, how it's defined. So there is a definition in the zoning code of what landscaping is. And that allows, in terms of your landscaping requirement, to include hardscape or decorative surfaces. And you can actually, it doesn't specify a percentage, just says a small amount. And staff is usually taking that to mean less than half of what your requirement is. So those decorative surfaces, as an application and as a policy, turf is included in that as one of those hardscape applications that we allow, similar to some of the bluff top installs you guys have maybe dealt with. If someone wants to come in and do some artificial turf back there, we allow it. It's just considered more hardscape and how we treat it, because you want to drain it. You don't want it percolating into the...
I think, though, the question, Kurth, is do we have anything, I think the answer is no, but
No.
in our code that allows us to regulate the type of artificial turf, the quality of the artificial turf, et cetera?
No.
We don't.
No, and as Kirsten said, we've been seeing it more and more, and I think it's really on our list of to address in future zone text amendments when we do a cleanup of the code. But again, as Kirth has said, that the way we've treated it is that since let's say on a residential lot, you're required to have minimum 25% of your lot landscaped. And then when you look at the definition of landscaping, it includes certain amounts of hardscape. So we treat artificial turf as a type of hardscape. And again, as long as it's less than 50%, meaning a small amount, that's generally has been the director's policy. We haven't really come across it that much, honestly, except on bluff lots, usually when, where you can't see it from the street. I could agree it could be a problem if we see somebody that wants to cover their whole front yard with artificial turf and it's a really bad-looking turf. I can imagine that being a problem, but luckily we haven't seen that yet.
I'll send you a few addresses. How do parkways fit into this? I assume parkways need to be landscaped and...
The Public Works Director actually installed artificial turf. Yeah.
Parkways in front of residents.
Oh, in front of residents.
Right. Where we have the obligation to maintain and...
Yeah, that requires an encroachment permit, and we have all kinds of authority as to what we would accept would be in those areas. And typically, that's artificial turf is not something we would, the Director of Public Works would accept.
Okay. And I think the only other question I had, and again, it's not even a question, it's probably more of a comment, is I was looking through that submittal, and on the part of the submittal requirements, I think it was page, let's see here, C3, the factor for pools and spas seemed to be really high when, everything I've seen to date have shown that as long as you cover your pool, it's actually less of a drain on the water resources. You got to fill it up, but at that point, it actually takes less water than a lawn and a lot of other
Right.
items. So I'm not going to,
Yeah.
and you guys can deal with that, but depends on who you ask, probably.
Right.
I assume. Sure.
So it does bring up an interesting question or issue, which is the goal of this is to try and reduce water usage. I remember when I did my house, there was a certain maximum percentage of hardscape. It seems like they're a little bit at cross odds, especially if you guys don't count you're counting the artificial turf as hardscape, but clearly it's intended to give the appearance of softscape. I just would hate to get into a position where, from a water use perspective, you'd prefer to have more hardscape to minimize that. But then from a code perspective with max hardscape on the lot, we're not at a point where the two are really working against each other, making it very difficult to comply, are we?
No, I don't think so, because the triggers for the water efficiency is just based on the total landscape area that they choose to install. The minimum landscape coverage requirement it's a different threshold. So if you have a lot 20, like as John was saying, 25% has to be landscaped. So 1,000 square foot lot, 2,500 needs to be landscaped, and per our definition, you could have 49% of that 25% be hardscape. Now, under the new ordinance, that leaves you with what 1,250 or something like that. They're still going to have to comply with the ordinance because it's probably a new installation. But I don't think it's rubbing. We kind of deal with this kind of all the time. The application you're talking about, and try to do something that is reasonable and within the limits of the definitions that we have. But I think they're a little bit exclusive, the development standard versus the trigger for the thresholds for when the water efficiency requirements kick in. Yeah.
It is a topic that we could talk about for a long time. There is the whole other goal in terms of water quality is to reduce the amount of hardscape that's non-permeable. So you really do want to have permeable landscape and preferably living types of landscape for water quality purposes. So there is clearly that balance that you need to make.
Right. I just remember when I did my house, I was surprised by the time my footprint was there and I had some driveway, some walkway, and a back patio. I'm like, oh shoot! I mean, it was kind of tight.
Commissioner Murphy?
Now that you brought this up, just to follow up on it, listening to the conversation, of course, we also have to add in water collection, but that's a whole different thing. When you talk about the artificial turf, to me, when it's not permeable and then it just runs off, the water just runs off, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, one would think it's better to have permeable turf, just like grass, but I know that's a different story. But it's difficult to grasp all of these concepts for most of us, not those who are in the business, but most of us kind of see it's kind of reversed. But based on what you just said, John, maybe that's kind of there's an understanding that it's sort of reversed.
Well, I think, maybe at some point, and Ursula, we could talk about bringing in our water quality engineer. We have a very expert water quality engineer that works in Public Works, Lisa Zawalski. She could give a whole seminar on water quality if she wanted to, but I'm not suggesting that, but that's an opportunity. But you know, the one of the problems with artificial turf is that it will allow some percolation, but the runoff that does come off from it is potentially toxic.
Yeah.
And you don't want that to get into the ocean. So, you know, again, these things are all kind of relatively new issues that we're just finally, you know, having to address.
It just seems like there's a lot of budding of, you know.
Well, ideally, if you can get percolation through landscaping, and at the same time that landscape area is drought tolerant. In our kind of environment, we want drought tolerant landscaping, which means really a lot of limits on the amount of turf.
If I can just add, I mean, the zoning code is there because if you drive through certain communities where they've allowed you to put hardscape everywhere, when you drive through that, it gives a very different feel from one that has very lush landscaping or just some landscaping. So the zoning code requirement is about aesthetics, okay, and that was set years ago. And then these new water efficiencies, you know, these are newer, and so there's trying to balance aesthetics with water quality, with water usage. So sometimes they are maybe slightly in conflict. But I think that the way the city is essentially saying that we're going to count turf as a hardscape, it is a way to deter the people from using that and trying to encourage them to do more of the drought-tolerant landscaping, because we will count that as landscaping, and ultimately we think that's better for the environment.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, it just seems like one more thing the state is handing down to the local municipalities to deal with, so.
But we have smart people.
Yeah. That's my only commentary on this. Anybody want to make a motion? Oh, you want to speak? Okay, thank you. So there's nobody in the audience that wants to speak. We have no cards, no correspondence. So we'll open and close the public hearing and turn it back over to the commission.
I'd like to make a motion. I don't quite know what to read here, but effectively I'd like to move that we recommend to the council to approve this resolution, draft resolution regarding the zone text amendment ZTA 15-0002. And I would like to acknowledge or insert that there be, staff can have flexibility on the date of implementation no later than July 1st, 2016.
Yeah, just so you know, you don't need to add that additional language. We'll take it upon ourselves if we think that there's an issue with not getting adopted before February 1st. We'll figure it out. And I think what you're trying to do is just move staff's recommendation, so that would be simple.
Yeah, okay. Move staff recommendation.
All right, there's a first on the floor. A second.
Second.
Commissioner Murphy second. Let's go ahead and vote. And that item passes 3-0. Congratulations. You're the applicant, I guess, right?
That's the city, it's the community.
Okay.
It's the state.
Moving on to old business. There is no old business. So we'll move to new business, no new business. We'll move on to staff reports. I don't see any staff reports.
Nope, just Happy New Year.
All right.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to commissioner comments. Commissioner Murphy.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Commissioner McCann.
Happy New Year as well, and I wish Commissioner Claus and Chairwoman O'Connor a speedy recovery.
Definitely.
And it's good to have staff back.
But obviously, we're the hardy ones. Those of us that are
Clearly. And I'll just echo everybody else's comments. Happy New Year. Looks 2016 should be a fun year. So from there, we'll move for an adjournment to the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission, which will be held on Monday, January 25th, 2016, beginning at 6 p.m., or as soon thereafter in the City Council chambers located at 33282 Golden Lantern, Suite 210, Dana Point, California.